Hello, fantasy managers. My name's Tom. We're back talking about F1 Fantasy. This is my first team selection video of the 2025 season. It is quite a new look for me this year out. So if you like the color scheme, you like the new graphics and everything, please do give the thumbs up. Give me a like on the video. It'd be really appreciated. And if you're new around here, please do subscribe because I do team selections, final thoughts, live streams, that sort of thing for F1 Fantasy related content throughout the season for every single race. So yeah, please do join me for that. Let's get straight into actual Australia though. The first race of the season, the game's literally just released. It's all a bit mental, but as you can see, UK for me, it's an early start on Sunday morning for me. I will be up at 4 a.m. because I'm not going to miss this. I'm not going to watch the replay. I want to be there for the live stuff. So yeah, I'm going to be pretty tired, but there we go. Track time at 3 o'clock. So yeah, don't miss any of the sessions. It's there on screen. It should be easy to find on the F1 website as well and elsewhere. But yeah, let's get stuck into the Australian weekend. So headlines going this weekend. I should put the fact that the biggest headline is probably that Lewis Hamilton's starting for Ferrari, and there he is staring up at me on screen right now as well. It looks like he's looking longingly at me commentating on this video, but there we go. That's just my dream. No, but Lewis Hamilton is for racing for Ferrari for the first time this weekend, so that is big news. But that's more big news for just general F1 fans. In terms of F1 fantasy, yeah, it's news, but we need to knuckle down into the actual nitty gritty of what's actually important. You can see the top 5 here from last season, just for give you a bit of a feel for what we're heading into. You know, it was a strong track here last year, obviously for Ferrari. McLaren also did well, and now with McLaren being on top, could see them being in a lot of teams this week. But first things first is it has been an absolute mad scramble. It is a mad scramble. It continues to be a mad scramble for all of us fantasy managers throughout this week because the game, a lot of us didn't think the game was even going to drop. It finally got announced on Monday that it was going to drop on Tuesday. So we've only had like a day or so to think things through and work stuff out. So it's just been absolutely mental. And throwing my team selection video in here straight away because I've already got a couple of strong builds in mind that I'm looking at, and then that will obviously be dependent on the practice sessions later on. But yeah, it's just mad. It's just mental. I almost actually considered doing like the first violin section of the season. For those of you that are new around here, the violin comes out when something terrible happens in fantasy. Generally when managers score really badly in the weekend, I will crack out the violin music and play for them basically, just for a bit of a laugh. But yeah, I almost considered bringing out the violin for the developers for leaving it so late, as well as, you know, not listening to our survey results at the end of last season. A bit frustrating with some things that haven't been changed, but I thought, no, we're not going to start off the season with a violin. That's just too downbeat. So let's get into the meat of it. So the other headlines we got here are McLaren are set to be on top. Pretty much everyone is saying that they're going to be the best. Even McLaren are kind of like, yeah, we're kind of the best, but we're not actually going to say we're the best. Like, it's pretty clear McLaren are the team to beat at the moment, and that's going to be interesting for when we get into the team selection in a couple of minutes' time, as to how much McLaren coverage do we want, and do we want any at all? Can we go without them because they're such expensive assets? It's going to be an interesting little thing to think about. And then behind McLaren, we've obviously got the kind of typical Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes trio. Who's going to be second, third, fourth out of those constructors? It's really up in the air at the moment. Some people are saying Ferrari, some people are saying Mercedes, some people are saying Red Bull. It's just a complete mixture. No one really knows. Hopefully we'll get a bit more detail come Friday practice sessions, and obviously we'll know for sure come the actual qualifying and race. But at the moment it's a bit up in the air, but we will be discussing a bit more who I think is going to be the best options there as we go through this video. So moving on, we've got rookies on the grid. That's going to be a big factor for our teams. The rookies coming in nice and cheap. They will act as enablers for us this season, at least for the first few races. We basically have to have at least a couple of rookies in our team, so it'll be interesting to see which ones we go for. The weather's going to play a big part, not just this week, but also in China the following week. China's coming up the weekend after, and it's a sprint weekend, so it's looking a bit miserable in China as well at the moment in terms of the weather. It's pretty cold, so I'm thinking Mercedes straight away, thinking like, oh, Mercedes might be good because it's cold 2 weeks in a row pretty much during the race. But yeah, certainly something to think about going into this weekend. So we have a quick look at the Australia track itself. It is a street circuit. It's back at the front of the season for the first time in how many years? I don't know, 5 or 6 years, something like that. And yeah, it's this bumpy, riding the curbs a lot, quite a mixture of sort of medium, some high speed corners in there as well. Quite a good mixture of corners really. It's something which I'd anticipate probably the Red Bulls probably don't like too much. And someone like the Ferrari, McLaren, and maybe the Mercedes are actually going to do all right round. So that immediately puts the Red Bull in my mind kind of on the back foot. You can see I've got here like the safety car percentage, overtakes, etc. They're all kind of color coded, if you can discern that from the pinky purple bluey background. So if I go through each one just so you kind of understand what's going on. The VSC safety car, 63% is an amber rating from me. So that's kind of, I've averaged out, I've got a spreadsheet behind the scenes basically, and I've averaged out all the tracks and how they average against, how they compare against all the other tracks. So in terms of how often a safety car or a VSC comes out, 63% is about kind of in the middle of the pack. So it's not like dreadfully unsafe, this track, but you wouldn't be surprised at all to see some sort of safety car. In terms of overtakes, it's really interesting for me that it's actually ranked 20th over the last 3 years. It's pretty terrible. That's why it's got the red colour in over the 20th. Again, it doesn't impact my decision making too much this particular race, because at the moment we're fairly forced into our budget options, so I wouldn't be looking too heavily at worrying about who's going to do the most overtakes in terms of the budget options. More just about who we can get in there in terms of actual financial impact on our teams. But yeah, interesting to note, and we're probably not going to see too many overtakes this weekend. And then a number of DNFs as well, kind of goes hand in hand with the safety car attribute there. Only 2 DNFs last year, and then 3 the couple of years before that. So again, it shows that this track can be dangerous, and we did have that big pile up a couple of years ago, although it was right at the end of the race, so it didn't really count as DNFing, so maybe that number actually should really be higher in reality. But probably the most interesting thing actually on this slide is actually the weather, the fact that on Sunday is actually going to be potentially just pouring with rain come race time. It looks like it's going to be quite cool, averaging around sort of 19, 20, 21 degrees for anyone that uses degrees Celsius like myself. I thought about putting Fahrenheit in there. I'm sorry, anyone like America or whoever uses Fahrenheit. I just can't get my head around it. I just use Celsius, so there we go. But yeah, it's gonna be pretty scorching hot on Saturday for qualifying. So it'll be quite interesting to see how that affects the teams, and then going into Sunday as well, how that's also going to affect the teams. One thing before we get into the actual meat of the video, this video is going to be a long video because it's the first team selection of the video, first team selection video of the season. But I do want to do just discuss one more thing. Now, I did discuss this in quite a lot of detail last night when I did a live stream. If you want to go back and catch that, I'm probably about half an hour through my live stream. You can find it on my channel. I discussed in quite a bit of depth about how the pricing, how we think the pricing works. I'm not going to go into all the details right here, right now, because I know a lot of people will just be itching to see actual drafts of my team, and I'm sure a lot of people have just skipped this already and gone straight to the chapter with the teams in, but there we go. I'm not going to go into the details exactly how and why we know about the pricing. Like I say, I think it's kind of out there, most people kind of know about it. All that really matters for the purposes of this video is that we do have a pretty good idea of what we think is going to happen with the pricing, and it has changed quite a bit from last year. So on screen you can see we've basically dropped off the C tier. They've all been lumped into the B tier. We've only got A tier and B tier. The A tier has been any asset that's over 20 million, and the B tier has been anyone under 20 million. I'm not actually sure how that works if someone is 20 million, but there we go. No one's 20 million at the moment. But basically what's going to happen is you've got this symmetrical pricing. So as you can see on screen, the A tier drivers, they only go up in increments of 0.1 or 0.3, and they only go down in increments of 0.1 and 0.3, and vice versa. Like for the B tiers, they get a bigger increase, 0.6 and 0.2, and a bigger decrease, 0.2 and 0.6. So straight away, I'm thinking first of all, it's going to be hard to build budget. Last year it was a lot easier to build budget because the C tier drivers, as there was a C tier category, the really cheap drivers went up fairly regularly, like 0.5 million or a million. It's quite easy, quote unquote, easy to gain budget, whereas this season it's not going to be quite so easy because of this symmetrical pricing. The fact that your C tier asset could, just get unlucky and just DNF or just have a bad race or whatever, and he loses 0.6 million. Like last season they were only losing like 0.1 or 0.2 million. Like the C tiers were pretty safe in terms of budget. They didn't really lose you anything, and they gained you lots. But this year round it's even for gains and losses as far as we can tell. This is not set in stone. It's not exact science, but it's what we believe is going on because of the whole leaked stuff from the developers. Well, like I said, I'm not getting into it here, but this is what we have to go off at the moment. And the guys at F1 Fantasy Tools are working hard to crack the algorithm to 100% accuracy. They're getting pretty close, so that's why I'm pretty confident that I can put this up on screen at the moment, because I feel quite confident this is pretty much like 98% accurate or something. So it's what we got to go on at the moment. Until we've had a couple of races, we won't know for sure. But yeah, it's interesting to me. I think it's going to be hard to gain budget. I think the B tiers are actually going to be kind of higher risk. And at first, going into the season, I was thinking I have to build budget. I have to build budget going into the season. That's going to be my priority. And now we've worked out this is the pricing system. My concept of I have to build budget is really kind of just fallen away by the wayside, particularly for the first couple of weeks, I think. Because we don't really know exactly how this works for sure. This could just be completely wrong, although I don't think it is. It could be completely wrong. And B, we've got the sprint weekend in race week 2. So sprint weekend, big points on offer. I want to maximise the points possible. So I'm not going to really want to be faffing around trying to work out how to scrap a bit of budget together. I want to maximise the points. So I'm thinking of just sort of putting the budget by the wayside a little bit, potentially going into this race weekend because of this pricing structure, as well as the fact that because of this pricing structure, the B tiers, although they can gain you more money, they're just higher risk. If someone, like I said, catches a DNF, you just get slapped with minus 0.6 straight away, like pretty much guaranteed. Whereas if you're A tier driver or constructor or whatever DNFs, then you end up losing a maximum of 0.3. So your A tier drivers, like I said, they don't gain as much. Most weeks they're probably just gonna gain or lose 0.1 million. But even if they have a bad race, you're not going to get slapped with the minus points as well as a terrible budget. So that makes me think pile in on the A tiers. So let's have a look at see how this is kind of shaped to some extent my actual team selection. So here we are with my actual 3 teams that I've made so far. I've just thought I'd just chuck it out in your face, basically, just like blur. There are my teams. This is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go into each of them individually and talk more in depth about each one. But I just wanted to show you kind of broadly what I'm thinking at the moment, and I'd be interested to know what your first impressions are like right now. Like without me explaining anything, like what are you thinking? Like, have I gone mad? Am I in agreement with what you've got going on? There, you'll notice a big omission is the fact I don't have any of the budget constructors. It's something I talked and thought a lot about on my live stream when I was talking about last night, but my thinking has really moved away from that at the moment, so that's why they don't exist on screen at the moment. But it's still an option, and we'll see come the practice sessions on Friday. If the likes of Williams and maybe Alpine are looking extremely competitive, then suddenly things get shaken up real fast, and Williams or Alpine, if they're genuinely looking like they can compete and potentially in the top 4 teams, then they may well come in here as a kind of enabler to improve my driver lineup. But for the time being, let's just get into each of these teams. So like I say, this was the very first team. The game got released like 11 o'clock on Tuesday, and by about 10 past 11 I had this team, and I was just like, yeah, I like it, and it's not really moved since then. It uses every single penny in the bank, nothing left in the bank. Now let's go through kind of why I like it. First of all, we've got Piastri. So we've got Piastri as the 2 times. I think he is the best option as the 2 times. Looking at the other options, you've got Lando Norris, Verstappen. I think they're just too expensive for what I'm trying to do here. Leclerc, Hamilton, also just kind of too expensive. I mean, I could potentially like move down like a Doohan to like a Hadjar, and yeah, it still doesn't quite get me there, does it? If I try and why can't I? Oh yeah, see, I'm 0.2 short, so I'm not sure. I'd have to get Hulkenberg in to try and get. I can scrape in a Lewis Hamilton. This is kind of if I want to go all in on Ferrari, but to be honest, I don't really want to do that. So let's just reset it for a second. I like this team because McLaren look like they're going to be the best team, and this gives me arguably the strongest, or at least maybe the second strongest. Maybe Lando Norris is just an inch ahead of Piastri at this moment in time, but considering the price difference, I think Piastri is arguably the best 2 times option for me personally. And I want to combine that with the constructor slots. That's why I really want to get the big constructors in there, because I just think they're going to score way more points than any of the lower tier assets. Like I say, if Williams and Alpine or anyone else, Haas are being mentioned as potential mixing it up in there as a super cheap option. If they look phenomenal on like the Friday practice sessions and Saturday practice session, then maybe I'll go down that road. But right now, they're really out of my thinking. I just don't think they're going to score enough points. The point scoring system is skewed, if anything, even more heavily towards constructors this year compared to last year because of the pit stop points as well. It's just more points on offer for the constructors and no extra way to score points for drivers, really. So the drivers are really missing out. So I want to prioritize the constructors, but I also want to have a strong 2 times. That's kind of the backbone of the team I'm going with. And then the kind of budget options more or less fill themselves to a large extent, but I will talk about them as well. So yeah, I really like this option because it gives me McLaren courage. It gives me a very, very good option as a 2 times. Obviously, home race, new contract, looking great for the first couple of seasons he's been in the McLaren. I'd be absolutely completely confident going into this weekend with Piastri as my 2 times. Completely confident. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he got pole. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he won the race. I mean, yes, he's got serious competition up and around here, but if the McLaren performs as well as it should do, then like I say, I'm very, very confident in having Piastri in this team. The problem is with having Piastri in the team is it's literally mathematically impossible to get McLaren in there as well as another big constructor. I'd have to drop down to like a Williams or an Alpine. I don't really want to do that. Let's just put the cheapest drivers in here just so we can see for sure exactly what I'm talking about. So I've got the 4 cheapest drivers in. If I try and get McLaren, look, I'm a million short of being able to do this. If I could get McLaren in here, I honestly don't think there'd be much of a team selection video to do right now. It'd just be, McLaren are in there. Pick the same team as me, we're all good for the first race or 2. The fact that I'm only a million, or I say I'm only a million, we're all only a million away from being able to get this team with McLaren in there. It does make me pause and think, okay, how do I build budget quickly? How do I get that million in order to jump onto McLaren going into the sprint weekend? And that's why it's tempting. If we hop back just 2 seconds, that's why it's tempting for this team 3 over here, because I think it's, why can't I manage this team? It literally won't let me manage the team. That's really annoying. I'm trying to click on manage team. It just doesn't let me. Let's try refreshing, see if that works. Manage team. There. No, it just doesn't want me to go in there. Okay, never mind. Absolute fail. We won't be going into that team. But yeah, I'm talking about team 3 over here. Having Antonelli as a 2 times is a potential way of increasing my money if I can get him to go up 0.6. If he's looking particularly good come Friday practice sessions, that maybe I'll go for this risk because it might enable me to jump up to a Piastri. And I'll tell you what, I can manage it here. So what I could do is actually just change my team in here. If the website's going to be stupid and buggy, then I'll just do it all in here. It's kind of annoying, but there we go. So yeah, anyway, back to it. Like I said, I cannot afford the McLaren on here with another big constructor as well as someone like a Piastri. The only option to do it is what I have on my team 2, which involves going to the next best thing, which is George Russell. But I'd have to drop user and bring in Hadjar and go with a team like this. This is basically what my team 2 is, and this is again a very strong contender for what I'll be starting the season with. I think Russell is a really good option, and he's so low owned. I know I don't really want to pay too much attention to ownership. I just want to make sure I have got the right thing for me. I don't really care what other people are doing, but actually the fact that 8%, he's only 8% owned, actually just makes it kind of a bit more attractive, because I think he's a very good option, and being so low owned, it's like, okay, I'll just have a good differential then. Fine, thanks for letting me have him. 92% of players. I do think he's doing really well. He's been out qualifying Hamilton pretty consistently all last season, and yeah, he's qualifying really well. He's doing well in the races. This track, Melbourne, particularly the conditions we've got coming in, the cold, the wet and everything, we've seen Russell and Mercedes kind of excel in those conditions in the past. China being a cold race as well. If we flick it over here, I've got the weather here for Shanghai F1. That is literally what it comes up as. And this is like the next sort of week or so. But just looking at the next week, look at the temperatures. Again, I apologise to anyone that doesn't use degrees Celsius, but here it is. It's like 13, 11, 9, 13, 10, 13. It's pretty cold. That is really cold. And what we saw last season was the Mercedes did really well in the cold. I know I'm simplifying things a lot here, but we want to try and break things down to make it simple, basically, so we can make it easier decisions in our team. Basically, when it's cold, Mercedes have done well in the recent past, and the likes of Ferrari have actually kind of struggled to get their tyres warmed up in those conditions. So, yeah, the fact that it's going to be cold for the first couple of weeks, at least in the race conditions around Australia, makes me think Mercedes might well be a very good option. George Russell, again, not quite as happy with him as the 2 times as I would be if I had Oscar Piastri, but I'm still, I would say, very confident with George Russell. He is very slightly prone perhaps to getting mixed up in the wrong sort of business, and maybe catching maybe an extra DNF or 2 then I'd really like to have my 2 times driver on. I think I'd feel slightly more comfortable with Piastri, but beggars can't be choosers, and we all have pretty restricted budget at the beginning of the season. And for me, having George Russell in there as the 2 times on top of this constructor setup, I'm actually really kind of pleased about. I have gone way off track here actually, because I was actually talking about this one still. Let me just jump back for a second, because the other option I could do is actually just drop in Ferrari as well and go in Red Bull. And I've seen a lot of teams or a lot of people talking about this sort of setup as well. I personally don't really like it. I'd rather have the the Ferrari in there for these purposes. Why? And now I can't add Ferrari in, even though I've got 27.1 million. This website is just not doing it for me today. I'm gonna have to do some filling around, get Berman back in. I have to do it that way around. That's really annoying when that happens, but there we go. So yeah, I have seen that Red Bull team construction, team build from other people on Twitter and that sort of thing. I personally am not a big fan of it, just because I'm not convinced Red Bull are going to set the world alight on the first couple of races, and I also don't think that this track particularly suits them. Verstappen's not had a fantastic record round here in recent years. Lawson is a bit of an unknown. He's not an unknown, but he's still only had a handful of races in F1. I have confidence in him, but still, it's still a new car for him, and the conditions are going to be pretty terrible. Yes, Verstappen would be great in the wet, I'm sure, but I have faith in the likes of Leclerc and Hamilton if I was to back the Ferraris as well. Hamilton also has a good record round here. He's got a bunch of podiums, a bunch of pole positions, so will we see some dream podium for Hamilton on his first outing with Ferrari? Potentially. So kind of overall, my summary of this particular team build is I really like it. Like I say, I made it within the first 10 minutes of the game being released, and I haven't really looked back since. I really, really like it. I'd be interested to know what you guys think on it. I guess I should, before I move on to the next build, is just quickly talk about my options down here, because I have maxed out my budget and I have got the option to potentially go a bit cheaper as well. I could go with Hulkenberg or Hadjar, and that's still an option. I kind of like Doohan. I feel like the Alpine might have some cheeky good race pace, a bit of Alpine coverage when there's rain in the air as well. I know Doohan is yet another rookie, and having him in there is a bit risky. Maybe I should just play it safe and go Hulkenberg or something. But I quite like Doohan in here. The Alpines have done well in the wet, and it looks like it will be wet in the race. Doohan on the dry conditions, I would guess he probably wouldn't qualify too highly, or at least if I picked him, I hope he wouldn't, because then he can make up positions and get those points in the race and get those overtakes and that sort of thing. But yeah, I do kind of like Doohan. Again, also home race for Doohan as well, and therefore potential driver of the day, potential if he makes up a few places in that. If he has a stonking race, then maybe he'll get driver of the day. That'd be pretty phenomenal. But yeah, so I do kind of like Doohan over the likes of someone like Hulkenberg and Hadjar. The Hazes as well. I'm just happy with both of them. They both fill me with quite a lot of confidence. Ocon, lots of experience in what's been a pretty strong Haz car over the last year, coming in at a pretty nice price. So I'm pretty happy to get Ocon there, as well as the fact that this uses all the budget. And if Ocon goes up a little bit and suddenly I can't get to him, and I might be stuck and stranded with someone like a Hulkenberg or Hadjar that I don't particularly want. Past that, we've also got Behrman, who again fills me with confidence. He looks very composed, calm under pressure, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to have Behrman. He looked good when he came in a few times last season. And Bortoleto also, looks great in F2. Very confident, reliable driver through his F2 season last year. So yeah, again, I'm pretty happy to have him in there as a super cheap enabler. He's the cheapest asset in the game. And even though he's in a rubbish car and he's a rookie, I again have this kind of air of kind of confidence about putting him in my team. So that's kind of why I've gone for these 4. As for Hulkenberg and Hadjar, I don't have anything particularly against them. I'm just not overly keen on them. Plus, if these guys that are higher owned, so I've got Ocon, Doohan and Behrman, if they go up in price and Hulkenberg and Hadjar don't, then that means I can sort of bank that money gain from an Ocon or a Doohan or whatever and jump down to a Hadjar or Hulkenberg and kind of bank that money, if that makes sense. So it's kind of nice to have the option to drop down an asset. But if you start off with the lower assets and these guys start climbing, you can't jump up, but you can always jump down. So I like having that flexibility in that regard. So right, let's move on. If it's going to let me, it will not let me. I don't know why. It will not let me click on my team too. It's very annoying. So I have to create it through here. But yeah, I have already touched on this team kind of already. I'll just build it up again here because the drivers don't really change that much other than the fact that Doohan has to go to the chopping block to enable Russell to come in here as a 2 times, because McLaren are just so expensive. You know, McLaren being an extra sort of 2.9 million over Ferrari means I have to make sacrifices, and the sacrifice is moving Doohan to Hadjar, which I think Doohan is a better asset than him, but I don't think he's like, you know, a great asset compared to Hadjar. I'm still fine with Hadjar, even though it's quite unexciting. But you know, budget, and we have to make these allowances. So yeah, I kind of have already talked about this. I'm not going to talk anymore about the rookie budget options here or anything. But the actual build and backbone of this, having Russell, Mercedes, McLaren, I really like, because it captures all the points from Norris and Lando. I think Norris is just too expensive at 29 million. So to get him covered for 30 million plus Piastri points in McLaren, this is just kind of what I've said earlier, that the constructors are just so strong. And yes, I like the pricing and everything this year, apart from the fact that, again, the constructors are too similarly priced to the driver options. So it's just like a no-brainer. Why would I go Lando Norris when I can just get McLaren and get Piastri's points as well, because the price is the same? They need to have a bigger price differential for future iterations, perhaps, to make that a bit more of a choice. But for me right now, the choice is just get the best constructor in there. McLaren are also good for the pit stop points. And pit stop points that have changed this season. So having these big constructors in there that are also just generally better at getting fast pit stops. Even Mercedes haven't been that bad in last season, from what I remember. They were kind of okay. But yeah, having these big constructors in there just where I want to be. And Russell's the next best option for me there. So past that, we've got Team 3, which basically just ignores George Russell and goes Kimi Antonelli, or I could also go Lawson if Lawson looks randomly really good come race day. And I think I can probably stretch. Can I just stretch to Red Bull? I can, yeah, just about. I could go something like this. If the Red Bulls just suddenly turn up and they're like phenomenal, including Lawson, then I could go this, because it's, again, I know it's more risky, the whole plus 0.6 and minus 0.6 for good and bad races and everything, but it does potentially get me some decent gains from Lawson being a B tier asset, because he's under 20 million. So this is a good way to get some money, perhaps. But like I said already, I don't really anticipate Red Bull to be that great this weekend. So I'd rather kind of back the likes of the Mercedes again on favourable conditions. And I just feel quietly confident about Mercedes. They seem to be just quietly going about their business through testing. They look pretty impressive to me. Antonelli again does concern me, because I would be putting the 2 times on him if I put him in there. This is like a big question mark for me. Do I back someone like Antonelli, so this young kid effectively driving in the wet on his first race around this fast street circuit? I'm not sure how much cojones I've got to put my money where my mouth is for that. But in terms of budget potential, I really do like it, because it does give me the potential option to climb up to somewhere more in the region of where Oscar Piastri is. So what I could do going into the next race, if I get the right price gains and Piastri doesn't go up too much, is potentially fiddle about a little bit and get down to someone like Hulkenberg. I need to gain like 1 million. This is what I'm talking about, to get this Piastri McLaren kind of dream here with a big constructor. So I think going with the Antonelli or Lawson option here just makes that more likely, but it is also very high risk, and I still don't think it's that likely to enable me to do it going into China. But if I want even a possibility of being able to afford this team with someone in here, like I said, it'd have to be Hulkenberg with the cheapest driver option, 6.4. So I'd need to make that 1 million. So that means I'd be relying on basically Ocon going up and Antonelli going up, and then Piastri kind of not going up by 0.3. He'd have to go up by 0.1, and then Hulkenberg would also not have to go up. He'd have to probably have a poor race, but then bringing in Hulkenberg after a poor race, the way it works out, probably means he's going to lose value again. But that doesn't really matter too much, because I'll be stuck with the best team going into China. So don't know. I feel like it's maybe trying to be too clever, too cute, and Antonelli's just too much of a risk. But yeah, I'm still thinking about it. I will see exactly what happens come the practice sessions. Before I wrap up, I do want to quickly go back, look at my three teams, and then also have a look at how they match up in the F1 Fantasy Tools simulation. So let's have a look at that. So here we got from F1 Fantasy Tools, a really great website. If you don't already use it, I'd recommend heading over there and having a look, because it's really good for gathering statistics and looking at your team selection, expected points, all that sort of stuff. So if we have a look at the three teams, these are the three teams I had on screen just a minute ago, but I've now basically just sliced up from F1 Fantasy Tools and stuck it on here. So we'll go through again kind of one by one. We've got the Piastri team first up, using all the budget. Expected points, so you can see the expected points down here are quite a bit higher, relatively speaking, than both the other teams. It does kind of go in rank order here, team 1, 2, 3. The Piastri build expected points 173. Compare that to the Russell build 160. And the Antonelli build 154. And you can see again this whole expected price change thing. Again, this isn't an exact science what the F1 Fantasy Tools guys are doing, but it is the best we've got going on at the moment. So the fact that the Antonelli build gives me a potential bigger window to jump onto that Piastri McLaren build with Mercedes going into China. The actual expected price change isn't that significantly better by going with this build. I think the only way to get to that kind of build would be to really gamble on it by going with a B tier, like a Williams or an Alpine constructor. You'd have to pretty much just have to hold your hands up, wave the white flag for Australia, admit that you're not going to score as many points, but you're going to have a reasonable chance, I'd say, at least a fair chance of being able to afford that dream team of McLaren, Piastri, Mercedes. But yeah, I think the Antonelli build, looking at this from F1 Fantasy Tools, expected price change of plus 1.69, it's not quite a bigger differential as what I would hope. I'd probably have to go, like I say, for this kind of C tier budget option, Williams or Alpine instead of like Mercedes, and just kind of really gamble. I personally don't know if I can commit to that. I don't know. I'm a manager that much rather has like a much more balanced approach to things, but I'll still be open-minded, and if I go for that and it backfires, it's going to be a real sour, disappointing start to the season. I'm not sure I can set myself up for that feeling. At the same time, if it goes well, then I'm going to be singing and dancing, because I'm going to be ahead of everyone on budget, and we'll be able to afford, hopefully, the Piastri McLaren Mercedes build going into China, which would be phenomenal. So yeah, the one other option is like potentially using Limitless going into China. And again, I don't want to think too much into that until we've had like Australia for a bit more information, but Limitless in China is potentially an option, and that way if you were to go with like a Williams or an Alpine as a constructor option, then you could get the budget gains going into through China with using the Limitless team, but you'd still get the underlying budget gains from that cheaper team. So it could be a way to build that early budget, and then coming out of China into, I think, Japan as the next race, you have potentially used your Limitless chip, and then you potentially have enough money if things have gone okay for you to actually jump on McLaren, Piastri, Mercedes after China. So that is potentially an option, something I'm thinking about. But overall, if I had to pick a team right now, I'm glad I don't, because I want to see the practice sessions. I want more information. I'm greedy, like all of us F1 fantasy managers, greedy for more information. If I had to pick a team right now, oh God, I would say probably not Team 3 at the moment. I think Antonelli build is probably just a bit off it for me. I think this is really hard. If it wasn't for the rain forecast, because the rain forecast does put me off Ferrari just a teeny bit, because I just don't expect the Ferrari to perform quite so well. But that said, the McLarens also, when I think back to like Brazil last year when it rained, didn't do particularly well either. It kind of balanced out the field a little bit. But I just have this nagging feeling that Ferraris might not be quite as strong, and therefore I'd probably go with the middle team here and have Russell as my 2 times, and go McLaren, Mercedes as my constructors, filling in with the rest of the budget options. So if I had to make a decision right this second, I'd say probably I'll be going Russell, McLaren, Mercedes build. But I still do really like the Piastri build on top of Ferrari, Mercedes as well. That's kind of where my thinking is at the moment, kind of split in between those 2 options. with this kind of wacky budget build option, number 3/4 of the Williams Alpine options, kind of floating around in the back of my mind as well. But I'm ultimately going to make my decision after the practice session. So tune back in if you can stomach listen to me talk for another 30-40 minutes. God knows how long this video is going to be by the time I finish talking. If you can stomach talking to me talking for some more F1 fantasy content, on Friday I will be uploading my final thoughts. I still haven't decided if I'm going to live stream into the deadline, because like I say, it would be like a 4 a.m. stream for me, and it's like that. I'm not sure I can stomach it, but we'll see if we can get enough persuasion in the comments, should we say. I might do a stream going into the deadline. But in the meantime, my plan is my next video will be on Friday. It'll be the final thoughts video where I kind of cement what I'm thinking, because at the end of the day, this game's still only been out for like a day and a bit when I'm uploading this. So, but that's the nature of the beast, because the developers have given us like 3-4 days to actually do everything and to pick our team. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been fairly informative. Like I say, I think my favourite team is just by a fraction the Russell build, but I still really like that Piastri build. But we'll see. These are my options. Of course, there are other options. There are plenty of other options, but I wanted to just talk about exactly what I'm thinking. Feel free to put in the comments suggestions or questions about any other team builds that you've got in mind. I'm happy to try and give my thoughts and feelings on that, but I didn't want to, this video is already quite long. I didn't want to just spend like all night talking about all the different options. I wanted to be a bit more focused on what I am thinking. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you also like the whole new look of everything. And yeah, I hope you'll join me again for Friday final thoughts. And it's time to breathe, to be honest. To breathe for a minute, because we don't have much time. We'll quickly be running around like headless chickens in no time again as we head into the deadline. So yeah, thanks very much for joining me. It's been lovely having a few months off for the winter, but now I'm like proper ready to go back at it again. So let's get at it and have some fun. So I'll see you on Friday for some more fantasy thoughts. Thanks guys, and catch you later. Bye.